The story begins in the middle of an intense battle between mages and a gigantic demonic creature. Even working together, the mages face enormous difficulties in stopping the beast's advance. At one point, the monster opens its mouth and unleashes a devastating attack toward the group. To prevent everyone from being hit, one of the mages quickly raises a powerful defensive barrier capable of withstanding the impact. While the barrier holds back the attack, the other mages seize the opportunity to interrupt the creature's assault. At that moment, a swordsman leaps onto the monster and strikes its head with a powerful slash accompanied by a destructive bolt of lightning. After this sequence of attacks, everyone combines their strength to launch a final blow. The assault succeeds, and the enormous beast is finally defeated. As he observes the outcome, one of the mages wonders whether he could ever defeat a creature of that level on his own. Soon afterward, the scene shifts to the kingdom's capital. The entire city is celebrating the hero's victory. Before the throne, all of them kneel before the king. Showing his gratitude, the monarch praises his 4 heroes for successfully defeating the mighty demon king. As a reward for their great achievements, he decides to grant each of them the titles associated with the elements of fire, earth, water, and wind. These titles represent the legendary 4 emperors, a position reserved only for the most powerful mages in the world. Normally, only people of noble blood can receive such an honor. Even so, the king makes an exception and allows all of them to use the title within the world of magic. Upon hearing this, Ephtal is left in shock, as very few people have ever had the opportunity to attain such recognition. Noticing his reaction, the king explains that although there is a difference in social status, magic holds special value in that kingdom. For that reason, Ephtal has also been granted the right to bear the prestigious title. From that moment on, he would be known as the Thunder God Emperor. Overcome with emotion, the man can hardly believe what is happening. The king then asks everyone present to applaud the new 4 emperors. It is then revealed that Ephtal dedicated more than 40 years of his life to studying and mastering magic. That recognition represented the ultimate reward for all the effort he had invested throughout his journey. Many years pass. In the future, a young elf girl appears behind Ephtal and calls him to breakfast. Turning toward her, he replies that he is coming and calls the girl Merlin. Looking up at the sunny sky, he becomes excited, believing it will be an excellent day for training. Ephtal spends his time teaching numerous students, preparing them to become strong mages in the future. During one of the exercises, the students manage to keep their magic active for quite a long time. Even so, their master points out a mistake, explaining that they failed to maintain the stability of their magic circles while casting the spell. After a long period of practice, the training session comes to an end. He then announces the next stage, which involves level 4 techniques, the same ones the students had practiced the previous day. At that moment, Merlin asks whether everyone could take a short break, noticing the tired expression on her face. Ephtal jokes that he himself is not tired yet. However, the situation leaves the man feeling somewhat saddened. The narrative then returns to the past. During an old mission, Ephtal encountered a woman who had died while her daughter was still alive. Back in the present, he looks at Merlin and remembers that event, stating that he still needs to avenge her family's death. Even after hearing this, the girl continues to look at him with concern. Determined to continue training, Ephtal suggests that everyone review their level 4 techniques. However, Merlin insists on moving directly to the full practice of that same level. The master lets out a laugh as he realizes how dedicated she is. The girl then declares that, as the foremost disciple of the Thunder God Emperor, she must work harder than anyone else. Although he admires her determination, Ephtal asks her not to rush. According to him, it would be better to continue training her concentration, since the fundamentals are extremely important. Merlin, however, insists that she needs to become stronger as quickly as possible. Even so, her master advises her to stay calm and avoid skipping steps. Shortly afterward, the scene changes to Merlin standing before a dense forest inhabited by countless beasts. Despite the frightening sounds echoing throughout the area, she tries not to be intimidated. When she finally enters the forest, she feels afraid, yet continues moving forward anyway. After walking for some time, she discovers a cave. Certain of her decision, she resolves to defeat the monster living inside. Her goal is to become the greatest disciple of the Thunder God Emperor. By doing so, She believes she will be able to teach magic to the other students and give her master a little more time to rest. However, her plan does not go as expected. Before long, she finds herself running desperately while a terrifying creature chases her. Shocked, Merlin cannot understand why her level 4 magic has no effect whatsoever on the monster. Refusing to give up, she stops and recites a level 6 incantation. Even then, the attack fails completely, and the girl is thrown far away. The beast appears before her with a murderous expression. But before anything worse can happen, Ephtal arrives and defeats the monster with a single strike. After saving her, he asks her never to do something so dangerous again. Ephtal acknowledges that Merlin is one of the most talented disciples he has ever trained. Even so, he states that she is progressing far too quickly. According to him, power gained in haste is unstable and easily fades away, slipping through the fingers of those who try to grasp it without proper preparation. At that moment, the creature reappears behind him. Without showing any concern, Ephtal recites a level 10 spell and instantly eliminates the beast. Later, in her room, Merlin reflects on just how powerful her master truly is. Ephtal then tells her to stop reviewing her studies and get some rest. However, moments later, he stumbles and begins coughing up blood. Embarrassed, he does not want her to see him in such a condition. Merlin had already noticed signs that something was wrong before. That is why she was so desperate to become stronger as quickly as possible. Realizing this, Ephtal finally understands the true reason behind the girl's excessive efforts. He then reveals that he does not have much time left and cannot afford to rest. Confused, Merlin asks why. The man explains that he must prepare successors capable of carrying on his legacy. People like her. Ephtal explains that he always dreamed of becoming the strongest mage in the world. For anyone who walks the path of magic, reaching the pinnacle is the greatest goal imaginable. He has pursued that dream throughout his entire life. However, he believes that he will never be able to reach the true summit of magic. Unable to understand, Merlin asks how that could be possible when he can cast level 10 spells with such ease. Ephtal understands her confusion, but explains that many talented young people are emerging. Compared to them, he feels that he can no longer accomplish as much as he once could. He even recalls the battle against the Demon King, explaining that he was the oldest member of the group and the only one who truly felt despair during that confrontation. The following morning, a boy arrives carrying some news. According to him, the Flame God Emperor has developed a theory related to magical aptitude. Curious, Ephtal decides to examine the theory and perform the test himself. The method uses strands of hair from the individuals being evaluated. These hairs must be placed into containers filled with special magical waters connected to the elements of fire, earth, water, and wind. After some time, the containers begin displaying different colors. The students ask what the results mean. Ephtal explains that, according to the theory, the intensity of the light emitted and the strength of the colors reveal each person's level of aptitude, ranging from rank E to rank S. In the case being analyzed, the blue and green colors shine intensely, indicating S rank aptitude for water and wind. Meanwhile, the red and brown containers show more modest results, corresponding to C rank aptitude for fire and B rank aptitude for earth. Noticing Merlin's confused expression, Ephtal immediately realizes that she did not fully understand the explanation. However, having raised her since childhood, he knows that the results accurately reflect her magical aptitude. He then comments that the Magic Academy normally teaches all types of magic during the basic curriculum. Only after several years do students discover their primary affinity. If such information could be identified at birth, he believes many children would have the potential to become even stronger. Excited by that possibility, Ephtal decides to test himself. Even though he believes he will never reach the absolute peak of magic, he still wants to discover his true potential. For decades, he trained harder than almost anyone else. He pushed himself hundreds of times beyond what was considered normal. Even the other emperors worked hard, but in his eyes, no one devoted as much effort as he did. When the results finally appear, something unexpected happens. None of the containers display any color at all. After consulting the theory, the boy informs him that a complete absence of color signifies a complete absence of magical aptitude. Ephtal is utterly shaken. The conclusion seems impossible to accept. Having no aptitude means receiving no blessing whatsoever from the spirits of nature. Unable to comprehend the situation, he repeatedly asks himself how it can be true. After all, he is the Thunder God Emperor. Merlin believes that some mistake must have occurred during the process and suggests repeating the test from the beginning. Ephtal agrees and decides to try again. However, no matter how many times the test is repeated, the result remains exactly the same. No color appears. After performing the test countless times without success, he eventually breaks down in tears, unable to understand why there is no magical aptitude recorded within him. Ephtal had always been aware that he never learned magic as easily as other people. While many advanced rapidly thanks to natural talent, he had to compensate for that difference through constant effort. It was by training relentlessly and dedicating countless hours to study that he managed to reach the level he possessed. Now, everything finally makes sense to him. The reason he never naturally stood out compared to the other emperors. The explanation for why the gap between him and the others continued to widen over the years. The reason was simple and cruel. He never had any aptitude for magic. Shortly after this devastating discovery, his illness manifests itself once again. Unable to remain standing, Ephtal collapses to the ground. Outside the room, Merlin stands silently before the door, worried about his condition. Even so, he asks her not to come in. Throughout his life, he believed that one day he would reach the true pinnacle of magic. Yet, in that moment, he realizes that he was never able to overcome the barrier imposed by innate talent. Everything he believed in, every dream he built, and all the hope he nurtured for decades seemed to crumble before his eyes. Even so, a part of him continues to think that if he had been given more time, or if he had been able to keep striving for a few more years, he might have naturally reached the goal he had pursued throughout his entire life. Not long afterward, Ephtal passes away. At that very moment, his reincarnation magic is activated. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself in a completely white space. There is nothing around him except that endless, illuminated void. Then, a person appears before him. Upon seeing her, Ephtal remarks that it has been more than 50 years since the last time he stood in that place. As time passed, he had even forgotten that he possessed that special ability. After all, this was the first place where he awakened after ending his life in a previous world, long before the existence he had just left behind. The woman smiles and comments that it truly has been a long time since they last met. She then explains that the skill perseverance fulfilled its role perfectly. Thanks to it, Ephtal never abandoned his goals and continued moving forward until the very end, always giving everything he had. Afterward, the woman reveals that the time for his second reincarnation has arrived. Once again, he will have the opportunity to choose 2 bonus abilities to take with him into his next life. She then asks whether he would like to receive an ability related to magic, something that would allow his growth to occur twice as fast as normal. However, Ephtal immediately refuses the offer. According to him, he does not need anything like that. The knowledge he has accumulated throughout his lives is already more than enough. The woman shows admiration for his response. She reminds him that, despite possessing no magical aptitude whatsoever, he managed to reach the position of one of the legendary 4 emperors. That achievement was not the result of his special abilities alone. It was the product of his determination and extraordinary willpower. Shortly after that conversation, his new reincarnation begins. When he opens his eyes again, Ephtal is already living a new life. As he walks down the stairs of his house, he is greeted by a warm embrace from his mother. The two then head off together to have breakfast. As he observes his new reality, he recalls that he is now living his third life. All of it is thanks to the skill granted by the goddess, reincarnation. As the years pass, something begins to happen. From the age of 4 onward, the memories and consciousness of his former self gradually return. Little by little, he completely recovers the memories of who he once was. This time, Ephtal makes a firm decision. He intends to reach the pinnacle of magic no matter the cost. Driven by curiosity, he runs off to see whether he was finally born with magical aptitude. However, after examining the situation, he discovers that he still possesses no natural talent for magic. While trying to come to terms with that reality, something unexpected happens. Suddenly, a dragon appears before him. The moment he looks at the creature, he immediately realizes that it is extremely enraged. For an instant, Ephtal wonders what a mere 4-year-old child could possibly do against a monster of that size. At that moment, he even thinks that it would have been far better to be born with an ability related to magical aptitude. However, before the situation can become even more dangerous, he reacts. With a single strike, Ephtal instantly defeats the dragon. After witnessing the result, he is completely astonished. Even after being reincarnated into this new world, his magical power has remained almost entirely intact. The strength he possessed at the peak of his previous life still resides within him. Realizing this, Ephtal understands that he has been reborn carrying the very same level of power he had attained before his death. It is explained that 3 years have passed since Ephtal regained the memories of his reincarnation. During that time, he conducted extensive research and discovered that he now lives in an era set 400 years after the period in which he previously existed. At one point, his older brother, Fraser, comes to visit him. It is revealed that he often travels from far away just to bring money to Ephtal's mother, as only the two of them live in that house. When Fraser notices that the boy is reading an extremely difficult book despite being so young, he is completely amazed. However, Ephtal casually replies that he does not consider any of those books difficult. Surprised by his answer, Fraser promises that he will bring him even more books the next time he visits. His mother comments that it is not surprising at all, since he is that man's son. At this point in the story, Ephtal's father has not yet been officially revealed. Fraser encourages the boy to keep studying, saying that if he continues at that pace, he will soon understand everything in the book. He also remarks that their father will certainly be very proud when he hears about it. Ephtal then asks when he will finally be able to meet his father. Fraser replies that he is extremely busy and rarely has time for anything else. Ephtal explains that he has never had the opportunity to meet his own father. That man is Duke Olcott, one of the greatest figures in the kingdom of Azure's lineage of mages and a direct descendant of the Thunder God Emperor. Because of this, Ephtal is very curious to find out what he is really like. However, his mother, who was born without any talent for magic, was never accepted by the Duke's official wife, or by his other lovers. The legitimate wife harbors deep resentment toward Ephtal and his mother, which is why they were both sent to an extremely remote region. As a result of that decision, the boy is not officially recognized by the family and has never been able to meet his father. Fraser is saddened after hearing this and promises to speak with the Duke to try to arrange a meeting between the two. Although disappointed by the situation, Ephtal decides to accept his brother's words. Curious about the boy's future, Fraser asks what path he intends to follow. Considering how dedicated he is to his studies, Ephtal answers enthusiastically. Knowing that his family descends from a legendary sage, he dreams of enrolling in the imperial capital's magic academy when he turns 15 and pursuing the path of a mage. Before he can finish speaking, his mother covers his mouth and says that will never happen because, just like her, Ephtal was born without any aptitude for magic. By that time, magical aptitude tests had already confirmed this, and the entire family knew that he possessed no magical talent. For that reason, she wants her son to learn swordsmanship, so that he can eventually enroll in the military academy. Ephtal tries to protest, but his mother continues preventing him from saying anything. Fraser smiles as he imagines Ephtal excelling at the military academy, perhaps even becoming the top student in his class. He then explains that magic swordsmen are extremely rare and, for that very reason, receive tremendous recognition within the army. Shortly afterward, he says he still has some free time and asks whether Ephtal would like to test his skills with a sword. As soon as they step outside, Fraser begins training him. However, Ephtal struggles quite a bit during the exercises. Up until that moment, his brother had taught him almost nothing besides academic subjects and, for some reason, a considerable amount of military science. From the very beginning, Fraser had always wanted him to follow the path of the military academy, mainly because he believed that Ephtal's lack of magical talent would prevent him from pursuing any other future. Even so, Ephtal once again says that he wants to study at a magic academy. Fraser explains that every person has different abilities and that no one can excel at everything. However, Ephtal insists, claiming that even without magical aptitude, he is still capable of using magic. In his thoughts, he remembers that 4 centuries have passed since his previous life and believes there may now be a clue capable of overcoming the magical limitations that had prevented his growth in the past. After thinking it over for a while, Fraser decides to conduct a test. He says that he will demonstrate a spell for Ephtal, and that, if the boy can reproduce it, even to the slightest degree, he will write a recommendation allowing him to study at the Magic Academy. Fraser then steps back, believing that what he is doing may seem cruel, but convinced that Ephtal will accept reality once he realizes his own limitations. Soon afterward, Fraser casts a level 2 wind spell, and even boasts that mastering such a spell can practically be considered a miracle. However, Ephtal looks at him and asks if that is all he can do. Without even chanting an incantation, he unleashes a spell that is far more powerful. Fraser is left completely speechless after seeing a 7-year-old boy cast magic of that level. In his mind, only a great sage, after decades of training, could accomplish something like that. To him, it simply made no sense. Still unable to believe what he has witnessed, Fraser asks what Ephtal just did. The boy apologizes and explains that he had only intended to reproduce the spell Fraser demonstrated, but accidentally ended up casting a level 4 spell instead. Fraser is utterly shocked, as a spell of that level is considered extremely advanced in that era. Ephtal, on the other hand, cannot understand why Fraser is so surprised, since in his previous life, level 4 spells were regarded as nothing more than basic techniques. Unable to comprehend the situation, Fraser asks how Ephtal is capable of using such powerful magic. The boy replies that he does not know the exact reason either. He simply studied everything he could find in books and has been integrating that knowledge into both his body and mind while constantly practicing. He then calmly reveals that he is capable of using spells up to level 10. The moment Fraser hears this, he immediately faints. It is explained that, up until that moment, Ephtal had never shown his magic to anyone else. However, after witnessing Fraser's exaggerated reaction, he begins to realize that there is something very strange about this era. Sometime later, his memories of the battle against the dragon return completely. He concludes that his victory could only have been possible thanks to some kind of miracle granted by God. This realization leads Ephtal to understand that there is something seriously wrong with the current state of magic. When night falls, Ephtal spends hours researching and trying to understand everything that has happened over the past 400 years. After comparing numerous records, he realizes that the culture of magic has fallen into a tremendous decline. Even a superficial analysis reveals enormous differences compared to the past. In addition, casting spells without using incantations has virtually disappeared. Suddenly, Fraser wakes up in shock and begins shouting after discovering that a child was able to use magic without an incantation. Ephtal explains that it was his own magic that caused the entire situation, but a tree branch ends up hitting him on the head. After that incident, he decides that he will continue practicing magic completely in secret. Time continues to pass, and Ephtal also keeps training to enroll in the military academy. Although he loses countless times during training, he never thinks about giving up, having inherited that determination from his previous life. Upon turning 10 years old, he begins to desire becoming even stronger through martial arts, seeking to attain power capable of surpassing even magic itself. At one point, a massive log appears in front of him, but Ephtal cuts it in half with remarkable ease using his sword. At that moment, he thinks that earning the title of the strongest magic swordsman might not be such a bad idea after all. It is also explained that, during that period, Fraser trained Ephtal in swordsmanship about 3 times a week. During one of those training sessions, a man unexpectedly appears behind them. His name is Moriat, the former commander of the Kingdom of Azure's Knights. Without wasting any time, Moriat attacks first. Ephtal immediately realizes that the man is incredibly fast and cannot even follow the movement of his sword. Moriat comments that the boy's agility still leaves much to be desired. To make up for the difference, Ephtal casts an acceleration spell, leaving the veteran completely astonished. At that moment, Moriat finally understands why Fraser recommended the boy. Fraser explains that although Ephtal officially has no aptitude for magic, he is able to use his own mana to strengthen his body. Functioning almost like a true mage, or even a great sage, Moriet begins laughing at the situation, finding it unbelievable that someone without magical talent can use magic so naturally. Meanwhile, Ephtal knows very well that if he were to use his full magical power, he could defeat the man with ease. Even so, Moriet keeps charging forward while boasting about his own strength. Irritated, Ephtal reacts instantly, grabs his opponent, and slams him directly into the ground. At that moment, Ephtal realizes that his body acted almost on its own. He then remembers that, in another world where he had previously lived, he had learned various grappling techniques. Moriet gets back on his feet, impressed, and announces that the boy has passed the test. Finally, Fraser reveals that the man is none other than the headmaster of the prestigious military academy of the Kingdom of Azure. Thanks to his successful performance, it is decided that once Ephtal turns 15, he will officially be accepted as a student at the military academy. The story advances several years into the future. Now, Ephtal is seen practicing magic beneath a heavy rain while his mother watches him from a distance, deeply worried about him. During his training, the boy realizes that there is still a slight delay whenever he uses level 9 and level 10 spells. Even so, he considers that brief delay quite useful, as it prevents other people from discovering that he has been secretly practicing magic. Shortly afterward, Fraser comes running over and warns Ephtal to be careful, reminding him that he will finally enter the military academy the following year. In that world, anyone who reaches the age of 15 is already considered an adult. At the moment, Ephtal is still only 14 years old. Even so, he already understands that studying at the military academy will not help him achieve his true goal. Ever since magical aptitude tests became a standard part of people's lives, pursuing the path of magic has become much more difficult for someone like him, since he officially possesses no magical talent whatsoever. Because of this, Ephtal makes an important decision. As soon as he turns 15, he intends to leave home and search on his own for a way to enroll in a magic academy, even if he has to overcome countless hardships to make it happen. When he returns home, Fraser brings unexpected news. He tells him that their father has finally shown interest in meeting his son and has already arranged a meeting between the two of them. Upon hearing this, Ephtal's mother is overjoyed, believing that her son will finally be acknowledged by the family. Ephtal, however, sees the situation differently. In his mind, there is no reason for that man to want to meet him only after 14 years. Some time later, Ephtal arrives at the enormous mansion where his father lives. The moment he steps inside, an absolute silence fills the room. Without hesitation, Ephtal introduces himself before the man. However, his father immediately interrupts him and states that he should not address him in that manner, but rather as emperor. He then says that he is pleased the boy will finally turn 15 because, from that point on, he will no longer have to spend money supporting him. Afterward, he simply demands that Ephtal never tarnish the family's name and orders his other son to test the boy's strength to determine whether he truly has what it takes to remain there. The scene changes to Ethan, who is preparing to take part in a training battle. Before it begins, his brother asks him to be careful during the fight. Despite his simple appearance, Joachim achieved extremely rare feats through swordsmanship during his years as a student, becoming a highly skilled swordsman. Joachim advises Ethan to accept defeat as soon as he realizes he has no chance of winning. He also tells him to run away while there is still time, as that would be the best choice in that situation. However, Ethan decides to stay and makes it clear that he has no intention of running away. Then, Joachim decides to give him a sword. However, as soon as Ethan holds the weapon, he realizes something is wrong. The sword is made of extremely strong and heavy wood, a material that is not normally used even in regular training. Joachim explains that no one in their family has a good opinion of the two of them. According to him, Ethan's mother had no talent for magic and even begged their father to allow her to give birth to Ethan. On top of that, Ethan himself was born without any magical ability. Consumed by his hatred, Joachim says he wants to get rid of Ethan's mother for bringing a child he considers useless into the world. However, before doing that, he decides to give Ethan a chance. Joachim begins attacking Ethan with words, trying to break him mentally. He says cruel things about the boy's mother and tries to provoke a reaction. believing he can destroy Ethan's determination. More and more frustrated, Ethan asks if those are really the words of someone who shares the same blood as him. He then charges at Joachim and notices that the man dodged his attack at the very last moment. For a moment, Ethan believes Joachim was simply playing around with him. After all, that man was known as a master swordsman. However, Joachim becomes shocked when he realizes Ethan's true power. As the boy improves his movements, he manages to surpass his opponent and defeat him with incredible ease. After winning, Ethan tells his brother that if he ever speaks about his mother that way again, he will not hesitate to kill him. Then, Ethan approaches his mother and says they need to return home. Before leaving, he thanks his father for allowing him to participate in that day. The scene changes to Ethan already back at home. He expected his father to do something after everything that happened. But nothing happens. Time passes, and when he least expects it, his brother appears at the door carrying a baby in his arms. The story then returns to moments before that event. At that time, the kingdom was facing a decisive war against a neighboring country. Suddenly, someone appears and reports that the southern barbarians have reached the royal capital. The attack begins immediately, and the boy orders them to take the crown prince to a safe place as quickly as possible. Back in the present, Ethan discovers that this was the only place his brother could think of to protect the baby. Ethan knows that, in the Kingdom of Azure, the political situation has always been complicated, since the second son of the former king showed greater ability than the firstborn. He became the current king, while the eldest son took the position of minister. During his reign, the second son never had the blessing of a male heir. Because of that, it was almost certain that the throne would eventually pass to the eldest son's descendant. However, everything changed when the current king finally had a crown prince. Because of this, the faction supporting the eldest son became furious. As their plans for the future were put at risk, Ethan asks how the enemies managed to enter the capital. His brother answers that it was probably the work of their own father. After all, he was the person who had the most to lose in influence and power if the line of succession changed. His brother explains that they cannot return to the capital at that moment. Because of this, he decides to cross the border and escort the prince to the nation's main military force, where he would be safer. When morning arrives, Ethan decides to join his brother on the mission. He remembers that 400 years ago, he received supplies sent by the king of that era during the campaign created to defeat the Demon King. Because of that, he believes he has a duty to protect that country. Ethan apologizes to his mother, but admits that he still cannot forgive his father and the others involved. When they reach the middle of the forest, they realize that crossing that area will allow them to reach the neighboring country. However, Ethan notices something strange. There are no small animals anywhere nearby. Before they can discover the reason, a loud sound similar to thunder echoes through the forest. Ethan's brother senses the danger and tells everyone to leave immediately. They begin running to escape the area, but suddenly they find a barrier of several guards blocking their path. Ethan's brother suspects they were being expected there, but believes that should have been impossible. Then, he realizes those soldiers belong to the Duke's own magic division. Faced with that situation, they realize they will not be able to move forward easily and begin questioning whether the best choice would be to turn back. When Ethan and the others look behind them, they see a massive trail of destruction caused by the fire, making it clear that there is no longer any way to return the way they came. At that moment, they finally understand that the sound echoing through the forest was not thunder, but the noise of the flames spreading through the area. With the situation becoming more desperate, they begin wondering if there is still a way to save the crown prince. The fire is blocking the path behind them, while the magic division remains in front, preventing them from moving forward. Ethan's brother decides to approach and try to solve everything by talking to their father. He believes that, despite everything that happened, his father is not a completely heartless person. When he stands before him, his brother asks if there is any chance they can resolve the situation through a conversation. He suggests that they pretend none of this ever happened, and asks his father to allow them to return together to the royal capital. The man decides to consider the proposal, mainly because the request came from his own son. So, when he approaches him, he asks if the two of them can still talk and reach an agreement. However, instead of answering, he decides that his own son has become nothing more than a problem and unleashes a powerful shock attack against him. Right after that, he orders them to burn everything. Ethan and the others realize that the ritual is not a simple attack. In reality, it is a preparation for an extremely powerful spell that carries the name of one of the legendary 4 emperors. It is a level 6 magic spell. In just a few moments, the entire area is engulfed in flames. Seeing that scene, Ethan remembers that all he ever wanted was to protect just one child. Because of that, he decides that he will never forgive anyone who tries to hurt his brother. Then Ethan makes a decision. He will show them all the true meaning of using magic. Without hesitation, Ethan uses a level 9 spell capable of completely freezing the entire area. Everyone is left speechless by the power they witness. Joachim asks what kind of force is spreading against all of them. As he moves forward, Ethan explains that, in their world, they have never heard of anyone capable of controlling magic of that level alone. He also says that even water-based magic is not exactly his specialty, and yet they are still unable to stop his attack. Ethan believed his father had properly taught his children how to use magic. However, after seeing that situation, he realizes he was completely wrong. His father finally recognizes Ethan and orders everyone to attack him with magic. Various types of spells are fired at the same time, but none of them have any effect on the boy. Everyone is completely amazed by the power Ethan displays. Ethan realizes they cannot even understand a basic spell like the one he just used. Then, the man orders everyone to combine their strength and launch their strongest magical attack against Ethan. The boy becomes irritated when he realizes those people are ruining their own reputation by using such a weak attack against him. Even so, Ethan stops the attack with absolute ease, leaving everyone even more terrified by the overwhelming difference in power. Then, Ethan begins calling them all pathetic. After that, he appears in front of the enemies and starts defeating them one by one. During the battle, Ethan remembers that all of this knowledge was only possible because of his brother Fraser. He thinks that maybe he can continue training and eventually learn how to place magic directly into his sword. Then, Ethan performs a new attack and causes the guards who are hit to be completely turned into ashes. Realizing they have no chance of defeating someone like Ethan, the people begin running away in desperation. Seeing that, Ethan asks if their mothers never taught them that they should never turn their backs on an enemy during a battle. He says he will show them the consequences of that mistake before sending them to their graves. Everyone is completely shocked when they realize that Ethan can manipulate time through his power. To them, it seems impossible, almost like a miracle granted by the gods. Then, Ethan decides to use a level 10 spell. With that attack, he defeats all of his opponents with absolute ease, as if they were no threat at all. His father and Joachim are completely amazed by the power Ethan displays. They cannot use their own strength against him, and only survive because some energy spheres end up protecting their bodies. Joachim then begs Ethan to stop, claiming that he will not get away with what he is doing. However, Ethan simply defeats him, and makes him lose consciousness without any difficulty. Ethan declares that everything they did was an attempt to assassinate the crown prince. To him, it would make no sense to simply eliminate everyone, including the people behind that plan. His father then tries to intimidate him, saying that he should not challenge him because it would be considered an act of treason against the national army. But Ethan shows no mercy. He defeats his own father and says he has no sympathy for someone who would try to kill his own son. In the end, the attempt becomes a complete failure. Alcott and Joachim are captured and later publicly executed by hanging as punishment for their actions. Before leaving on the mission, Ephtal was called by his brother, who wanted to make sure he was all right. When he saw that he had survived, the man felt relieved and realized that the magical necklace had truly worked. In reality, the artifact carried the protection of the Oberon Guard, which once belonged to him. Thanks to the strength gathered from the blessings of so many people, Ephtal survived, something that filled his brother with happiness. After everything that happened, the official decision was made. As a consequence of the incident, Fraser lost his title as Duke. Even so, he was not completely ruined, as he had risked his own life to protect the crown prince. Soon after, Ephtal revealed a power that left everyone speechless. He repeatedly cast level 7 spells, such as Evil Flame and Chaos Pearl. The display was so unbelievable that his companions began wondering if this was really the same Ephtal they knew. Seeing their reaction, Ephtal apologized for hiding that secret all this time. Instead of pressuring him, the two understood that he must have had an important reason for acting that way. Ephtal knew he could never reveal that he had been reincarnated, so he decided to keep that truth hidden. The three of them agreed to keep everything a secret and concluded that it would be better to never show that kind of power in front of other people, as it could cause a huge disturbance in the world. With everything settled, they asked what Ephtal planned to do from that point on. Even though he possessed power far beyond normal limits, he answered that he would enter the Magic Academy. His goal was to further improve his abilities in an environment made for that purpose and continue dedicating his life to the path of magic. Hearing that answer, his brother realized that the decision had already been made, so he promised to train him with the sword until he turned 15, explaining that mastering this type of combat would also be important in the future. Ephtal accepted the offer and thanked him. That was how he took the first step on his true journey to reach the peak of magic. Finally, the moment arrives when our protagonist comes of age. His mother tells him he's free to choose whatever path he wants. From now on, he can decide his own future, and whenever he wants to come back, their home will always be waiting for him with open doors. Before saying goodbye, she gives him a warm hug. Moriat can't hold back his tears and starts crying as well. Everyone is moved, wishes Ephtal good luck, and hopes for a bright future. Before leaving, he thanks everyone and promises he'll find a way to overcome the barrier of talent. As he continues his journey, Ephtal decides to take a break at a tea house. Looking to the side, he notices an old man kneeling before Edwars. The man is surprised to see such a famous mage at such a modest stand. With great respect, the old man asks if he would be willing to give a lecture to some children. Edwars coldly replies that he should never speak to him again without permission. He then reminds him that he's busy reading and demands not to be interrupted. He also says the old man should value every second of his life because it's nothing like his own. The old man lowers his head even further and apologizes for interrupting him. Then, in front of everyone, he explains that Edwars has become a rank adventurer in the Adventurers Guild. Comparing their paths, he says he's already 50 years old and never managed to rise above rank C. According to him, teaching magic to children in such a remote place is the best he can do because he believes he's nothing more than a complete failure. Even as he apologizes again, he mentions that they even prepared a banquet to welcome the mage. Edwars asks what kind of nonsense that is. To him, that night is special for a completely different reason. It marks the end of the period required for the demon girl's slave crest to become permanently fixed to her body. The old man knows that if someone channels life energy into her before the crest fully stabilizes, the ritual formula of the crest will be affected. After explaining that, he leaves the area. Ephtal immediately understands the situation. He knows the period during which it was forbidden to have relations with the slave he purchased has already passed. The thought fills him with disgust. At the same time, he remembers that if he hadn't chosen Merlin in the past, she might have ended up living as a slave too, just like the demon girl now standing before him. Suddenly, a man comes running over and warns everyone that a giant orc has appeared nearby. Panic spreads as people begin shouting for the knight's order. After all, there isn't a single adventurer in that remote place capable of defeating a creature that powerful. At that moment, Edwars of the Furious Flames steps forward, determined to kill the beast. He declares that a giant orc would be a major challenge for a rank B adventurer. But for someone at his level, it should be an easy task. Hearing that, Ephtal realizes that after 400 years, reaching rank A had truly become an extraordinary achievement. Without wasting any time, Edwars casts a level 4 spell and believes he has defeated the monster. Certain of his victory, he announces that the show is over. However, the creature remains standing without a scratch. Shocked, he can't believe anything could survive a spell of that level. He soon realizes the enemy is a superior level 4 variant of its species. Realizing he has no chance of winning, Edwars gives up on fighting and runs away to save himself. Before fleeing, he creates a barrier to turn everyone present into bait. At that moment, Ephtal casts a specialized level 6 anti-magic spell and instantly dispels the barrier. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Everyone escapes as fast as they can. Edwars watches in complete disbelief, trying to understand how Ephtal accomplished something so incredible. Without hesitation, Ephtal dodges the giant orc's attack and immediately counterattacks. After defeating the creature with nothing more than a level 3 spell, even he becomes curious about how it was possible. Meanwhile, Edwars falls to the ground and desperately asks why his level 4 spell had no effect on the monster. The old man explains that the magical energy used by Ephtal had been refined and transmuted, giving it power equivalent to a level 5 spell. When the old man learns that the boy is only 15 years old, he's even more amazed. Ephtal immediately realizes what the real problem is. The adventurer hadn't even mastered the basics of magical manipulation. In that situation, even a simple level 1 spell would have been enough, as long as it was used correctly. Everyone looks at Ephtal with admiration. Even so, he downplays what happened, saying it was nothing but luck. Before leaving, however, he calls Edwars over. Ephtal tells him he should show respect to his elders. He also acknowledges that the old teacher knows far more about magic than he does. Then he reminds him that trapping all those people inside a barrier to use them as bait amounts to attempted murder, an extremely serious crime. For that reason, a criminal like him has no right to own slaves. Ephtal demands that he free the girl and turn himself in to the authorities. Without putting up any resistance, Edwars agrees. The scene shifts to Ephtal leaving the area, but he notices the girl is still following behind him. He turns around and asks how much longer she plans to keep following him. The young woman replies that she'd like to ask him for a favor, if he doesn't mind. Curious, Ephtal tells her to go ahead. She says she wants him to become her new master. If she continues wandering alone, she'll eventually be captured as a runaway slave. Ephtal fully understands the situation. The slave crest is an extremely difficult magical technique to remove, even after someone no longer has a master. If a malicious person tricks her into forming a new contract, her life could become even worse. The girl explains that he seems like a kind person, and is, without a doubt, infinitely better than Edwars. Ephtal then asks how someone from the demon race ended up living as a slave. She explains that many years ago, her people lost a war against the human nation, and ever since then, her clan has been enslaved. Ephtal understands that those who become slaves rarely regain their honor. She then reveals that, although it may not seem important, she's descended from the royal family of the demon race. She also explains that she's a distant relative of Merlin, the headmaster of Altina Magic Academy, one of the most prestigious magical institutions. Upon hearing that name, Ephtal immediately remembers that Merlin was once one of his subordinates. The girl adds that Merlin is one of the most powerful mages of the demon race, and was trained by the legendary sage himself Ephtal, one of the 4 emperors. Learning that, even after 400 years, Merlin has earned such prestige and become such a respected figure makes Ephtal genuinely happy. Without a second thought, he decides to become the girl's new master. After all, he couldn't just abandon one of Merlin's relatives in a place like that, living under such miserable conditions. Some time later, the two arrive in town before sunset. Ephtal remembers that he came there to take the Academy's entrance exam, which is scheduled for the following day. The girl can't understand why someone as powerful as him still wants to study magic since, in her eyes, he already seems to have mastered everything he needs. Before he can answer, her stomach growls loudly, prompting the two of them to look for a place to eat and rest before the big day. They enter a rather upscale restaurant since the next day is so important. The employee seems doubtful that Ephtal can actually afford the meal, but he still asks for a table for 2. As soon as they walk in, several people are shocked to see that he brought a slave with him, something completely unheard of in a place like that. Ignoring everyone's stares, Ephtal asks Anastasia to sit in a chair instead of staying on the floor. She hesitates because doing so goes against everything she learned as a slave. But after a great deal of insistence, she finally agrees. To make sure she obeys, Ephtal gives her a direct command, and she finally takes her seat at the table. At that moment, a man approaches and declares that slaves are strictly forbidden from sitting at the tables in that establishment. He also points out that the restaurant is a high-end place frequented only by the elite. Then he asks whether Ephtal actually has enough money to pay for the meal because he believes he was seated there by mistake. According to the man, that place isn't meant for ordinary people, much less someone accompanied by a slave. Seeing the situation unfold, Anastasia says she'd rather eat at one of the food stalls outside, believing that would keep them from causing any more trouble. Ephtal tells her not to worry. He then shows the man what he's holding and asks if it's enough to pay for the meal, adding that he has more if necessary. The man is completely stunned when he recognizes dragon drops. Just one of that size is worth more than 500 gold coins. His attitude changes instantly, and he orders the staff to provide them with the best service possible before personally escorting them to the VIP room. Ephtal remembers that his mother gave him a large amount of money, even though it was part of the inheritance left by his father. After they're seated, he notices that Anastasia hasn't touched her food and asks why. He then tells her to eat as much as she wants without worrying about anything. Anastasia replies that no one has ever treated her with such kindness before. She then asks whether a slave like her really deserves to eat a meal of that quality. Ephtal explains that they'll be spending a lot of time together and asks her to think of it as nothing more than a gesture of friendship. He knows Anastasia endured countless cruel experiences and suffered unfair treatment throughout her life as a slave. He also realizes that, even without meaning to, he might one day treat her the wrong way. If that ever happens, he wants her to tell him she's unhappy and get mad at him. However, Anastasia replies that she doesn't even know what it feels like to be angry. Ephtal understands that Anastasia went through countless terrible experiences during the years she lived as a slave. Because of that, she doesn't even fully understand what it means to feel anger. To make things easier, he explains that she only needs to tell him whenever something bothers her or whenever she doesn't like something. Then Ephtal decides they'll train together so she can gradually break the habits she developed as a slave. He wants her to at least try getting angry once. Anastasia makes an honest effort, but once again, she fails. Sometime later, they finally arrive at Crone Magic Academy. The girl repeatedly thanks Ephtal for buying her new clothes. Ephtal then explains that the academy has one of the most competitive admission processes around because the competition for a spot is incredibly fierce. Anastasia doesn't understand why so many people want to study there. Ephtal explains that after graduating, finding a good job becomes much easier. With that in mind, Ephtal suggests that she should also take the entrance exam since anyone is allowed to apply. If everything goes well, she'll have a great chance of finding a good job in the future. On top of that, Ephtal believes Anastasia has an excellent chance of being accepted because her talent for magic is exceptional. At that moment, a man appears before the applicants and announces that the final stage of the entrance exam will be a battle between all the participants. And that's the end of another episode. After taking charge of the exam, Franz Bagger announces the start of the first test. This stage is a massive battle between all the applicants, where they are free to use magic, weapons, or any other means available. The objective is simple: eliminate the other contestants by knocking them out of the castle until only 5 participants remain. Watching everything from above, Franz remarks that, as a B-rank associate, he enjoys observing exams like this. Most years, nothing particularly impressive happens, so he's curious to see whether this year's newcomers have anything special to offer. As soon as the battle begins, several candidates are quickly surrounded. Franz isn't surprised, since the weakest participants are usually the first to be eliminated in battles like this. However, things suddenly change when one boy strengthens his legs with magic and sends an opponent flying out of the arena with a single kick. Franz notices that the boy has mastered a body enhancement technique, but believes that alone won't be enough to carry him to the end. Soon after, another candidate steals everyone's attention. Ephtal unleashes a powerful wind spell and eliminates 16 participants in a single attack. Even the spectators are shocked, since that level of power seems far beyond what anyone would expect from an entrance exam. Her master, however, simply confirms that she truly possesses extraordinary talent, while some believe she relies entirely on the honorary award to cast magic. Her master explains that the truth is actually the opposite. Anastasia then proves it herself by casting 4 level 4 spells simultaneously. The display leaves everyone speechless, since almost no one believed such a feat was even possible. After the first stage ends, the successful applicants begin to be announced, But the biggest surprise comes when candidate number 588, Ephtal Alcott, receives an incredible score of 958 points. Even the examiners can't hide their astonishment, as the Academy has never recorded such a high score before. His name also draws attention because it matches that of the legendary god of thunder, leading many to comment that he must be incredibly confident to carry such a name. Shortly afterward, Anastasia checks her own results and discovers that she has been accepted into the special class. Overjoyed, she thanks her master for everything he taught her and happily celebrates her achievement. He simply congratulates her and says she can finally enjoy life as an ordinary student. Next, it's Ephtal's turn to look for his name on the list. To his surprise, it isn't there. Confused, he tries to figure out what happened, even wondering if his magical aptitude had been secretly evaluated and caused him to fail. For a moment, he considers filing a complaint, but gives up, thinking it would only make things even more complicated. Before he can understand what happened, Anastasia notices another announcement. Instead of being rejected, Ephtal has been selected as a special treatment student and will also serve as the group's chief representative. Both of them are surprised by the decision. After reading the benefits, they learn that the position includes free tuition, school supplies, meals, and even a monthly allowance. On top of that, the representative is expected to attend official events and help promote the academy. Despite the advantages, Ephtal feels that the role sounds more like being the school's mascot than living the quiet student life he had imagined. His real goal was to study quietly, spend time in the library after class, and research an innovative way to develop magical aptitude. Even so, he realizes that, having been chosen for the position, he probably won't be allowed to refuse. Later, while walking around the academy with Anastasia, Ephtal senses a familiar presence. Merlin also feels something unusual and soon appears before them. Upon seeing Ephtal, Merlin asks a direct question, trying to find out whether she has any connection to Ragin Academy. Merlin seems concerned, believing that such a connection could put her place at the school at risk. Ephtal says she has no idea what Merlin is talking about. Not interested in continuing the conversation, Ephtal simply says he's hungry and invites the girl to have lunch. Merlin tries to stop them, but they continue on their way. After they leave, Ephtal asks Anastasia if she knew who that person was. She explains that Merlin is actually a very distant ancestor of her family. Even so, she admits she never had the chance to meet him personally, since they belong to completely different eras. Shortly afterward, the entrance ceremony for the new students begins. The Academy welcomes all the newly admitted students and announces that they are now part of the prestigious Crone Magic Academy. The speech also highlights the scholarship recipients and the special treatment students, encouraging everyone to grow together in magic regardless of class or status. The professors also remind them that hard work and dedication will matter far more than their background. It is then revealed why Merlin is there. She had been invited as a representative of Altina Magic Academy to attend the ceremony and strengthen the relationship between the two institutions. After stepping onto the stage, she officially introduces herself and congratulates all the new students on beginning their journey as mages, encouraging them to make the most of every opportunity to develop their talents. Realizing that Merlin is only there as a guest, Ephtal feels somewhat relieved, since it means she isn't part of the Academy's staff and won't be staying for long. Even so, he knows he'll have to deal with the situation before his true identity raises any suspicions, because one mistake could allow Merlin to discover the truth. Soon afterward, it's time to announce the representative of the special treatment students. The name called is Ephtal Alcott. The moment he hears it, he realizes the situation has become even more complicated. After all, his name is exactly the same as one of the legendary 4 emperors, and he also earned the highest score in the Academy's history. Before long, countless students begin talking about the mysterious boy, wondering who he really is and where someone with such extraordinary talent came from. After the ceremony, several girls become eager to talk to Ephtal, completely captivated by her. Meanwhile, Merlin finally gets the chance to speak with Ephtal in private. She starts by asking a few simple questions to confirm his identity, and as the conversation continues, she realizes her intuition was right. Every answer Ephtal gives only strengthens the suspicions she had ever since reviewing his exam. Merlin then asks an unexpected question. Does Ephtal know the concept of reincarnation? He immediately realizes she's getting dangerously close to the truth. Although he keeps a calm expression, he knows he'll have to be extremely careful with everything he says from that point on. Without wasting any time, Merlin explains why she came to that conclusion. She says she saw his exam results, and his performance looked like one of the legendary 4 emperors casually taking an entrance exam for fun. She also reveals that most of the professors were able to verify his answers, but none of them could understand the reasoning behind them. In her eyes, only someone who had actually lived during that era could have answered that way. She then presents the strongest evidence supporting her theory. Every answer Ephtal gave on the exam was based on magical theories that existed around 400 years ago. When she asks how he plans to explain something so unusual, Ephtal finally realizes he made a huge mistake. Since every question seemed incredibly easy to him, he answered them without considering that magical knowledge had evolved significantly over the centuries and that many of those old theories were no longer used. At that moment, he realizes his own experience had exposed clues he never should have revealed, even without directly claiming that he is a reincarnation. Merlin says she believes Ephtal has a very special connection to the legendary Thunder God Emperor. She also concludes that the real reason he avoided meeting her until now was to keep her from discovering that connection. The more she pieces together the evidence, the more convinced she becomes that her theory is correct. Realizing he won't be able to hide the truth much longer, Ephtal decides to reveal only part of the secret. Even then, he is careful not to tell her everything, since some truths must remain hidden. He explains that the legendary Thunder God Emperor once had a lover, a fact that was never made public. Their relationship resulted in a child blessed with extraordinary magical talent. In secret, the Emperor personally passed down all of his techniques and knowledge, preparing that bloodline to preserve his legacy, to avoid persecution and political conflict. The family isolated itself in the mountains, far from civilization, refining its magic generation after generation while keeping the Emperor's teachings hidden. Merlin is completely shocked, since she has never come across this story in any book or historical record. Ephtal explains that the matter was kept under absolute secrecy because it was directly tied to the authority of the 4 emperors, which is why almost no one knows that this bloodline exists. Only the descendants themselves have preserved the truth throughout the centuries. Finally, he reveals his true origin. Ephtal says he belongs to the 13th generation of that secret family, and that he himself is the 13th Ephtal Alcott. He also explains that the existence of this branch of the family remains unknown to almost the entire world, and protecting that secret has always been one of his ancestors' greatest responsibilities. After hearing the truth, Merlin admits she's a little disappointed that no one ever told her about it, especially since she has dedicated her entire life to studying the history of magic. At the same time, her curiosity grows even stronger. She says she intends to follow the magical path left behind by Ephtal and prove that her own abilities have also reached an extraordinary level over the past 400 years. To her, that will be the best way to show how far modern magic has advanced. Changing the subject, Merlin reminds Ephtal that he will be participating in that afternoon's mock battle as a special combatant. Taking advantage of the opportunity, she proposes a magical duel during the demonstration, turning the event into the perfect chance to measure each other's strength in front of everyone. Ephtal points out that a contest at that level would attract far too much attention and could easily create problems, since displaying that much power would raise countless suspicions. Even so, the proposal catches his interest. After thinking it over for a few moments, he accepts the challenge. He also wants to see just how much Merlin has grown over the last 4 centuries and compare modern magic with the teachings his family has preserved. The news spread quickly throughout the academy. Students were talking about how the freshman would be facing none other than Merlin. Many believed that, no matter how talented Ephtal was, he was still far below the academy's headmaster. Even so, everyone was eager to watch. The special simulated magic demonstration was an event created to showcase the gap between new students and the professors of Altina Magic Academy. For Ephtal, however, it was an opportunity to see how much his former disciple had grown over 400 years. The event officially began, and the organizers introduced Merlin as the legendary headmaster of the academy and a hero of the demon race. The crowd grew excited at the chance to witness his magic up close, while the students cheered enthusiastically. Some were rooting for Ephtal. Among them were those who encouraged him and wished the former master good luck. When the two finally stood face to face, Ephtal observed that Merlin had become an exceptional mage and stated that he wanted to see the path she had walked since his departure. The battle truly began when Merlin cast a level 6 flame burst. However, the attack was completely nullified. Ephtal analyzed the technique and realized just how much Merlin had improved. Moments later, a level 7 perfect wall instantly blocked another spell. Merlin acknowledged his opponent's skill. Reaching that level of coordination and control at such a young age was remarkable. However, she also carried her own teachings and experience. The two began exchanging equivalent spells. Merlin countered attacks with similar magic, demonstrating extraordinary mastery. Ephtal realized that since being reincarnated into this era, he had never seen anyone use level 6 magic with such precision. Meanwhile, Merlin was already preparing his next spell. Normally, advanced magic required time to reconstruct, but he had mastered techniques that allowed him to unleash high-level spells one after another. Ephtal immediately responded with his own magic. A level 7 demonic ice froze Merlin's flames, followed by a level 7 ice titan. Merlin realized that his opponent had anticipated the fire attack and prepared the perfect counter. The battle accelerated even further. Merlin began firing level 7 spells at incredible speed, pressuring Ephtal without giving him a moment to rest. Even so, Ephtal kept up with every movement. The attacks continued to grow more intense. Merlin tested his opponent's limits while Ephtal responded with equally fast spells. Gradually, Merlin began to feel that something was strange. She realized that Ephtal was not simply exploiting her weaknesses and help her improve. Determined to prove her worth, Merlin activated several level 7 perfect moles simultaneously. The technique was powerful. In response, she used a level 8 teleport and appeared in a different position to attack. Even with that strategy, she was defeated in the very next exchange. Ephtal revealed that he had already expected an attack from behind and had prepared a teleport of his own. Merlin admitted defeat in that exchange of techniques. For 400 years, she had refined that skill. Yet she still lost to someone who had mastered the same art. Strangely, instead of frustration, she felt nostalgia. Seeing Ephtal standing before her brought back old memories and made her smile. But Merlin had no intention of ending the battle there. She announced that she would finally use her ultimate secret technique. If it failed, she would accept defeat without complaint. Then the level 8 Thor's hammer appeared. At first, Ephtal believed it was just the standard spell, but he quickly noticed the difference. Merlin activated another Thor's hammer simultaneously with her left hand. The true secret technique was simultaneous activation. Ephtal responded by activating a powerful defensive technique. However, Merlin raised the stakes even higher by creating simultaneous activations at 3 different points. Even while trying his best to evade, Ephtal admitted that he had not expected such an impressive trump card. But Merlin was still not finished. Shortly afterward, she achieved 4 simultaneous activations of level 8 magic. The crowd was stunned. Not even during the era when Ephtal originally lived had anyone witnessed something so extraordinary. Merlin's growth exceeded all expectations. Seeing the result of 400 years of dedication, Ephtal decided to respond with his full strength. He activated the level 10 Thunder God's Light. Merlin recognized the power behind the attack. Maintaining 4 level 8 spells at the same time was already pushing her consciousness to its limit. An ordinary person could barely control 2. Even so, she launched another attack. The level 8 Soul Cannon surged forward with all its power. As Ephtal watched his disciple's growth, he concluded that seeing her come this far was not a bad thing at all. Then he released his true power. A massive level 10 lightning bolt appeared and swept across the battlefield. The energy completely absorbed Merlin's Thor's hammers. Witnessing that scene left Merlin speechless. It was impossible, or at least that was what she had always believed. Yet the answer stood right before her eyes. It was exactly as she thought. Only someone capable of performing a feat of that level could use a level 10 Ephtal in such a way. At that moment, she arrived at the only possible conclusion. In the entire world, There was only one person capable of casting a level 10 Ephtal like that. Because of this, she looked directly at Ephtal and voiced her suspicion. According to Merlin, Ephtal was the reincarnation of the legendary Ephtal. Faced with that statement, Ephtal realized there was no longer any point in hiding the truth. After all, Merlin knew the techniques of the original Ephtal better than anyone else. The confirmation came soon after. Merlin admitted that she had been impressed by the entire battle, especially the final demonstration. Even after 400 years, she could still recognize the greatness of her master's power. In turn, Ephtal praised Merlin's performance, reminding her that she had continued training throughout all those years without ever becoming complacent. Hearing those words had a tremendous impact on her. For 4 centuries, Merlin had devoted herself to magic without pause, constantly striving to improve and honor the teachings she had received. Knowing that her efforts had been recognized directly by Ephtal made everything worthwhile. Emotion overwhelmed her in that moment. After all, after 400 years of waiting, she had finally reunited with her master. Tears began to well up in her eyes, but Ephtal immediately scolded her, saying that she looked like a child. Merlin simply lowered her head and accepted the reprimand without complaint. In her master's presence, she felt that she would always remain a child, regardless of her age or position. While the two were talking, Marie came running over and called out to Ephtal. When she arrived, she noticed Anastasia standing beside him and was surprised. For a moment, she even assumed that the girl was one of Ephtal's slaves. Realizing the misunderstanding, Ephtal immediately cleared things up. He explained that it was nothing like that and that Anastasia was simply under his care. As for the reasons why, he chose not to go into detail. After the introductions, Merlin observed the interaction between the two and commented that there were probably complicated circumstances behind the situation. Even without receiving an explanation, she decided to respect Ephtal's decision and ask no further questions. However, there was no time to focus on that. Marie remembered something far more urgent and revealed that a huge problem had come up. The reason was simple. After everything that had happened during the demonstration, many people wanted Ephtal to become a professor at the academy. When he heard that, Ephtal had no idea how to react. All he wanted was to live a normal life as a student and continue learning magic. Once Merlin understood the situation, she immediately came up with an idea. The solution was to leave before the crowd could find them. Without explaining much, she took Ephtal and Anastasia away from the academy. After a long journey, they finally arrived at their destination. When Ephtal saw the place, he was completely shocked. It was his old mansion. The residence where he had lived centuries ago still existed. Merlin explained that the property had been passed down through generations and protected for 400 years. Overcome with nostalgia, Ephtal looked around as memories of the past resurfaced. Every part of Altina Magic Academy brought back memories of a distant era when he devoted his days entirely to studying magic. It felt strange to think that 400 years had passed since then. Yet at the same time, it was comforting to be back in such a familiar place. Then Merlin revealed the plan she had prepared. She would personally handle all the paperwork necessary to enroll Ephtal and Anastasia in the academy through a special process authorized by the headmaster. Thanks to her position, everything could be resolved quickly. Once the procedures were complete, both of them would have full access to all the facilities of Altina Magic Academy. The news left Merlin extremely excited. The possibility of spending her days at the academy alongside her master was something she had never imagined she would experience. After so many years, she would finally have the chance to be with the person who had taught her so much about magic. Marie also began thinking about the practical details. She pointed out that a new uniform would need to be prepared for Ephtal, since he would be attending the academy like any other student. However, Merlin had something even better in mind. Using her authority as headmaster, she decided to enroll Ephtal and Anastasia in Altina Magic Academy immediately, without wasting time on unnecessary procedures. The proposal pleased Ephtal. As a student, he would finally be able to devote himself completely to studying magic, exactly as he had wanted from the beginning. On top of that, knowing that Merlin was the headmaster made the entire situation much more reassuring. Trusting his former disciple, Ephtal thanked her for the help. Merlin replied that she would take care of everything. For her, helping her master was an honor, And so, after 400 years, master and disciple finally walked side by side once again, now within the same magic academy, ready to begin a new chapter of their journeys. As he looked around, Anastasia asked where they were. Up ahead stood a massive treasure vault. Ephtal remembered that now that he knew how to use a sword, he could finally search for the weapon he had always dreamed of wielding. Even so, he felt a bit uncertain and wondered whether someone like him was really allowed to enter a place like that. Anastasia explained that everyone was busy with the enrollment process and that no one would be allowed to leave the area until later, so there would be no problem. When they reached the entrance, Ephtal asked if this was really the famous treasure vault. Anastasia pointed ahead. However, before they could move forward, an unexpected interruption occurred. The guard in charge of protecting the vault immediately blocked their path. He warned that no one would be getting through and ordered them to leave before they got hurt. When he learned that they had come to retrieve the swords known as rarity, his irritation only grew stronger. In his eyes, the two of them were nothing more than thieves trying to get their hands on a legendary treasure. The man began praising the sword, explaining that it had supposedly been brought by Emperor Ephtal himself from the Demon King's castle. It held an SSS rank, something extremely rare. He even claimed that the weapon had once sliced a level 10 Ephtal in half. Convinced that they were just curious students connected to Merlin, the guard decided to overlook the incident and ordered them to leave. According to him, only Merlin or one of the 4 emperors had permission to enter. When the two tried to explain that they truly had that right, the man completely lost his patience. Annoyed because he believed he was dealing with messengers from a barber, he began insulting Ephtal. He said Ephtal was incompetent at magic, did not deserve his position, and had probably become one of the 4 emperors through dishonest means. Ignoring the insults, Ephtal and Anastasia asked where Thunder Mist was. The guard decided to answer in a mocking tone and pointed it out. He then explained that all the treasures were protected by magic and that ordinary thieves and mages would not even be able to touch them. The man believed that only someone on Merlin's level could remove that protection. Then something completely unexpected happened. Without any warning or dramatic display, Ephtal cast a perfect level 8 dispel. The barrier vanished instantly. The guard was completely stunned to see such a powerful spell neutralized so effortlessly. As he tried to process what had just happened, Merlin arrived. She immediately complained about being called a barber and wondered if no one could hear her complaints from outside the mansion. A moment later, she noticed Ephtal and learned that he had come to retrieve Thunder Mist. During the conversation, Merlin also realized that Ephtal had learned swordsmanship. Excited by the discovery, she commented that she would like to take a few lessons from him someday. Meanwhile, the guard finally understood who was standing before him. The person who had cast a perfect level 8 dispel without any difficulty was the real Ephtal. As soon as he realized the magnitude of his mistake, he panicked. He immediately bowed and began apologizing for all of his disrespect. Ephtal accepted the apology without showing any sign of anger. He simply explained that he and Anastasia now lived there and that it would be best for the guard to memorize their faces to avoid similar problems in the future. The guard agreed without hesitation. Some time later, the group was walking through the city, observing the buildings around them. Ephtal commented on how impressive it was to find stores that had remained exactly the same even after 400 years. Merlin pointed out a tailor shop that was still operating in the same location. Many years earlier, it was the shop where they had ordered the curtains for Merlin's room. In addition, Ephtal's and Anastasia's uniforms were also made there. After enjoying a pleasant meal, they began thinking about what to do next. At that moment, someone approached to promote an event taking place throughout the city. A large treasure hunt. The rules were quite simple. Numerous treasures had been hidden throughout the city, and the participant who found the greatest number of items would be declared the winner. On top of that, each competitor would be allowed to keep everything they found during the search. The grand prize immediately caught everyone's attention. It was a trip to a hot spring resort. Merlin suggested that Ephtal join the competition alongside them. He was not very interested at first, but he quickly noticed the excitement of everyone around him. Anastasia also seemed eager to participate, so he eventually accepted the invitation. While searching for clues around the city, Ephtal realized that the treasures were hidden using transformation magic. Someone suggested using perfect dispel to remove all the spells at once, but he immediately rejected the idea. According to Ephtal, the entire city was covered in countless different types of magic. If they used perfect dispel carelessly, they could end up causing a huge mess. For that reason, he decided to remove only the specific spell used to hide the treasure they were looking for. When they asked if such precise control was really possible, Ephtal simply answered that it was. Right after that, he cast a spell and identified the target with absolute accuracy. Thanks to his ability, the group managed to find the necessary treasures and won the competition. After things settled down, Merlin went looking for Ephtal again. Her serious expression immediately caught his attention. She explained that she had just come back from the public bath with Anastasia and that there was a specific reason she wanted to talk. The girl revealed that she had decided to observe Anastasia closely to determine whether she was truly worthy of staying by Ephtal's side. The situation immediately made Ephtal uncomfortable. He quickly denied any possibility of that kind of relationship between him and Anastasia, but the girl continued insisting. In her opinion, someone at Ephtal's level should be accompanied by someone equally extraordinary. Because of that, she believed it was her responsibility to carefully analyze Anastasia before reaching any conclusions. Ephtal denied it again and showed clear annoyance with where the conversation was going. That was when she revealed the real reason behind her concern. During the bath, she had noticed something unusual about Anastasia. It appeared that she was a special Drayman. After discovering this, she wanted to know if Ephtal still intended to keep her by his side. Without the slightest hesitation, Ephtal answered yes. Her reaction was immediate. From her perspective, keeping Anastasia close was like living every day with a bomb ready to explode. Even so, Ephtal made it clear that it was his own decision. Seeing how firm his answer was, she realized she would not be able to change his mind and decided to end the matter once and for all. Some time later, the first day of classes at the Magic Academy finally arrived. As soon as Ephtal entered the academy, he immediately attracted the attention of almost every student. Many were surprised to see a human attending a famous academy that mainly accepted demons. The comments started spreading right away. Some questioned why a human was there. Others treated his presence as something completely absurd. Ephtal felt uncomfortable hearing those words. He explained that it was natural to attract attention in an environment like that. However, he also reminded them that he had the same right as anyone else to follow his own path in the study of magic. Meanwhile, the news about a human student arriving at the academy continued spreading quickly throughout the classroom. Several students openly showed their dislike. Some claimed that humans should not even have access to the academy. Others said he could only have entered because of the influence or money of someone powerful. Ephtal listened to all those criticisms in silence. Among the students, one of the most arrogant members of the class decided to confront Ephtal directly. He claimed that the academy was an elite institution meant only for races considered superior, such as demons and elves. In his view, it was completely unacceptable to share a classroom with someone he considered inferior. Ephtal only replied that he would do his best to keep up with the classes and give his all, but that answer was not enough to convince him. The boy explained that he had gone through an extremely difficult selection process to earn his place at the academy. Because of that, he believed it was unfair to study alongside someone who, in his opinion, did not deserve to be there. Another student tried to ease the tense atmosphere. He admitted that humans were not very well regarded among demons, but claimed that he did not have any racial prejudice. Even so, he emphasized that he valued only merit and believed that people without talent should not occupy a position in that place. Ephtal calmly observed the entire situation. When comparing it to his experiences from the past, he realized that even after 400 years, the way most people viewed the relationship between humans and magic had barely changed. Shortly after, the class officially began. Before the new student could be introduced to everyone, an unexpected announcement caught their attention. Merlin personally appeared in the classroom. The students' reactions were immediate. Everyone was amazed to see the principal of Altina's Magic Academy personally taking charge of the lesson. Some even believed she was there because of them. Among everyone, Abe Ports was the most confident. In his mind, there was no doubt that Merlin had come to personally observe the progress of the best student in the class. However, reality was completely different. Merlin quickly clarified that her presence had nothing to do with Abe. She was there because of Ephtal. The revelation left the entire class surprised. Abe struggled to accept it. To him, there could only be one explanation. Ephtal had to be the son of some extremely influential figure. Merlin found that conclusion very disappointing. She explained that seeing the world through prejudice and limited assumptions was exactly what separated great mages from those who would never rise above mediocrity. Then, she gave a warning to the entire class. According to Merlin, everyone should pay close attention to Ephtal. Getting to know him would be a rare opportunity to break down the many prejudices they carried about humans. The students became even more curious. Meanwhile, Ephtal could only think about how the peaceful life he dreamed of having at the academy seemed to be getting further and further away. After class ended, one student decided to approach him. The boy commented that if Merlin showed so much interest in him, there had to be some secret behind the situation. Ephtal tried to explain that everything was simply Merlin's fault, but the student came to a completely different conclusion. He said he had already heard rumors that Merlin often taught magic to human children and showed special attention to certain students. Because of that, he concluded that Ephtal was simply the principal's favorite. Ephtal saw no reason to continue the conversation and decided to ignore the comment. The student, however, warned that he did not intend to get involved with him again. Soon after, the class moved on to the next activity. The topic of the day was choosing the class representatives for a competition between classes. Almost every position had already been filled. Only the forbidden magic category remained. That was when Abe Ports volunteered to participate. Merlin acknowledged that Abe's swordsmanship was among the best of that year and decided to accept his candidacy. The position was quickly filled, although the result was slightly different from what she had originally planned. Even so, Merlin continued asking if anyone else wanted to volunteer. At that moment, Anastasia caught her attention. Merlin wanted to know if she was actually being serious. Anastasia hesitated for a moment, but eventually explained that she was not nominating herself. Instead, she wanted to recommend Ephtal for the position. The suggestion surprised some people in the classroom, but Anastasia had her reasons. To her, Ephtal was someone truly admirable. His strength, his achievements, and even the hardships he carried were all part of the person he had become. Anastasia believed that even the scars from his past showed how much he had overcome challenges that most people would never be able to face. By watching him for so long, she learned about her own weaknesses and found inspiration to continue growing. That was why she believed no one was more suitable to represent the class than Ephtal. As Anastasia expressed her confidence in him, the classroom remained silent. Now it was time to choose the representatives of Altina Magic Academy for the inter-school competition. The position up for grabs was for a magic swordsman, and to earn it, a student from Ephtal would face a student from Abe in a mock battle. The winner would be chosen solely based on swordsmanship, since magic was forbidden during the fight. Before the battle began, the student from Abe provoked his opponent, saying he would get no satisfaction from defeating someone who was not prepared to face him. As the two competitors stood ready, some students commented that the humans seemed frightened, while others believed that was because Abe's opponent was known for his exceptional sword skills. The Ephtal student, however, had a very simple plan. He intended to start the fight with a kick to create a distraction, exchange a few blows with his opponent, and then lose convincingly so he would not attract any attention. However, as soon as the battle began, everything went completely differently from what he had planned. The first strike was delivered with full force, and the fight was practically over instantly. To everyone's surprise, the winner turned out to be the student from Ephtal. The spectators were completely shocked by the result, and many began wondering what was going on with Abe. Some concluded that Lord Merlin was probably changing the way the magic swordsmen were trained, while others believed there had to be a specific reason for such an unexpected performance. The students began commenting that humans were not known for their magical abilities, but mainly for their strength in physical combat. In their view, that explained why Merlin was paying so much attention to such an exceptional swordsman. They also believed this was why Merlin had personally taken responsibility for the class. The protagonist, however, did not want to attract unnecessary attention, so he simply agreed with the other students' comments and continued following the conversation. To him, acting naturally was much safer than standing out for no reason and raising suspicions. Later, during a meal, Anastasia commented that her master had defeated another powerful opponent with extreme ease. She then asked what he would do if he ever faced a situation that could not be overcome through strength alone. Her master replied that he would continue doing his best to prevent any situation from reaching a point beyond his control. Anastasia considered that an answer worthy of someone truly strong. However, what she really wanted to know was how he would react when faced with a fate that was completely impossible to avoid. Upon hearing the question, her master realized that his current situation was already exactly like that. After all, he had come to that place precisely to overcome something that seemed impossible to change. Anastasia was impressed once again by his answer, and said that he was very different from her. Despite this, Anastasia still saw herself as nothing more than a useless slave. She felt that she had never been able to repay everything her master had done for her, and because of that, she believed she should serve him as best as she could, faithfully fulfilling her role as a holy servant. Her master immediately stopped that line of thinking and explained that he understood her gratitude, but would much rather share a meal with her than simply be served. He then pointed out that the meat was starting to get cold and insisted that they eat together. Anastasia thanked him, moved by his words. As they ate, she praised the meal, and her master replied that meat dishes were always delicious. Anastasia agreed and commented that eating meat made her feel stronger. Little by little, the atmosphere between them became much lighter and more relaxed. Troubling news was beginning to spread throughout the kingdom. Several treasures had been stolen, including the powerful artifact known as the Thunder Mist Tower. Investigations by the authorities indicated that Anastasia was involved in the theft and had disappeared shortly afterward. Not long after, the existence of a special slave portal was also revealed, hidden beneath the sacred slave portal. This contract had completely different rules from the conventional ones. Normally, criminal orders or commands that put a slave's life at risk were prohibited. But this special system could bypass those restrictions and force a slave to obey orders that would normally not be accepted by an ordinary contract. Once the existence of that system was discovered, it became clear that Anastasia had been bound by an extremely dangerous contract. Even though he could not understand why anyone would possess something so absurd, her master had already considered the possibility that something like this could happen. To him, simply accepting the situation would solve nothing, so he decided to break the special contract that was keeping Anastasia bound. However, his companion immediately warned him about the enormous risk involved in that decision. Canceling the contract meant directly challenging the god responsible for sustaining the pact. There were reports of holy slaves being destroyed by divine forces after attempting to break similar bonds, making it clear that this would not be a simple task. Her master acknowledged that the danger was enormous. He explained that the contract was protected by divine power and that confronting it could have devastating consequences. If his attempt failed, even the country he had saved as the Thunder God Emperor could end up being destroyed. Despite all these possibilities, he refused to believe that Anastasia could have betrayed him willingly. He remembered that he had cared for her since the day they met and stated that Anastasia was not the kind of person who would simply abandon him like that. His companion agreed with that conclusion, acknowledging that such an attitude was completely consistent with his master's personality. Still, there was one problem that needed to be solved. They had to find out where Anastasia was. Fortunately, her master had already prepared for a possibility like this. Before the theft occurred, he had placed a tracking spell on one of the treasures. Thanks to that preparation, he believed he could trace Anastasia's path and locate the place where she had taken the artifacts. He also believed that Anastasia was probably already taking the treasures to her true master. Without wasting any more time, he decided to leave immediately to find her and declared that he would bring her back. Meanwhile, Anastasia was being praised for her performance in the operation. The person responsible for the plan celebrated their success and pointed out that everything had gone exactly as planned. Besides Merlin's treasures, the group had also managed to obtain the artifact that belonged to the boy. We are then shown how the two met. In the school hallway, Anastasia happened to run into someone familiar. The person was surprised to see her there as a transfer student. Anastasia, in turn, admitted that she had not expected to find that person there either, especially under those circumstances. The conversation continued until an even more shocking revelation came to light. Anastasia discovered that she was being used by someone connected to the Demon King from 400 years ago. It was then explained that 5 artifacts had already been gathered, including the 3 her sister had stolen previously. That number was enough to fulfill the contract required for the current generation. Even so, the problem involving the special slave portal remained unresolved. The curse placed on the members of that bloodline would not disappear so easily, and if any of them had children, the curse would be inherited by the next generation. In this way, the same cycle would continue indefinitely, passing from one generation to another with no apparent end. After that, Anastasia was ordered to wait until the following morning, when her future would be discussed directly with her father. With no other choice, she simply accepted the order and remained there. Once she was finally alone, her thoughts became increasingly heavy. Every time she completed a theft and returned to report the mission's progress, Anastasia felt nothing but emptiness and disgust toward what she was doing. But that day, the feeling was even worse. Deep in her mind, a single thought kept repeating over and over. Anastasia believed that she had betrayed Ephtal, and that there was no way to turn back anymore. To her, everything was finally over, or at least that was what she believed at the time. As she remained lost in thought, memories of her family began coming back to her. Anastasia remembered how, whenever she came home, she would always insult her sister. She treated her like a burden, saying that nobody wanted her there, and that it would be better if she simply disappeared. Her father tried to stop the arguments and keep the situation from getting worse, but his efforts were never enough to change the other's behavior. Even after spending months away from home, her older sister would always return with money to help support the family. Yet instead of receiving gratitude for everything she did, she was met with complaints and accusations. When it was time for her to leave again, she simply said goodbye without complaining and went on her way. At the time, Anastasia could not understand why her sister continued to wear that sad smile even after hearing so many cruel words. To Anastasia, her behavior made no sense, but it would take many years before she discovered the real reason behind it. The next memory was even more painful. One day, Anastasia was brought before her father and a young nobleman connected to the Abe family. Without understanding why she was there, she was told that a succession ceremony would begin immediately. Anastasia tried to ask questions and understand what was happening, but no one gave her any explanation. She was forced to remain silent while those responsible prepared a ritual in front of her. When everything was finally ready, the truth was revealed. The portal standing before Anastasia was the dreaded special slave portal. Her sister had failed to fulfill part of the contract, and because of that, Anastasia would be forced to take on the role that had previously belonged to her. The agreement was simple but extremely cruel. With each generation, someone from the family had to deliver 5 valuable magical artifacts. To obtain them, the chosen person had to infiltrate noble households by taking on the status of a slave and steal the artifacts specified by the contract. Once the mission was completed, the responsibility would be passed on to the next generation, causing the same cycle to continue forever. Her sister had already managed to deliver 3 artifacts, meaning only 2 remained to reach the required number. It was at that moment that Anastasia finally realized the truth that had been hidden for so long. Her older sister had died because of that mission. After that discovery, everything began to fall into place. Around 300 years earlier, the ancestors of the Planova family had fought a war against Portesk. After being defeated, the family members were forced to accept the contract imposed by the special slave portal. Since then, the curse had been passed down from generation to generation, forcing each newly chosen member to continue fulfilling the pact's demands. Her sister knew the entire history and understood exactly what fate awaited the family. That was why she decided to carry the burden alone and protect Anastasia from facing that reality for as long as she could. 3 years passed after that day, and Anastasia continued believing that everything would finally end once she completed the mission. She believed that after delivering all the artifacts required by the contract, she would finally be free from the curse and could leave that life behind. However, when she managed to deliver the required artifacts, Anastasia discovered that she had been deceived once again. She woke up and was told that 3 more artifacts were still needed to fulfill the new requirements, even though she had completed everything that had originally been demanded of her. Anastasia would be forced to continue serving. When she protested and questioned the decision, she received a cruel response. Those responsible for the contract stated that the original agreement no longer mattered because as long as the special slave portal continued to exist, Anastasia would remain obligated to obey its orders. She had no choice. Those responsible for the contract celebrated the fact that they had found such a capable slave. Anastasia had managed to bring them even the powerful thunder mist, demonstrating abilities that far exceeded their expectations. Because of this, they planned to exploit her even further and use her abilities to obtain more artifacts. Their plans went beyond that, as they intended to force Anastasia to have children so the curse could be passed on to the next generation, ensuring that the cycle continued indefinitely and that the special slave portal would continue to be sustained by future generations. Hearing those words, Anastasia finally could not hide her anger. She questioned what her sister's death had truly meant. After all, her older sister had sacrificed her own life trying to complete that mission and protect the family, believing that once she fulfilled her part of the contract, Anastasia would never have to face the same fate. Now, however, Anastasia discovered that all of that sacrifice had not been enough to free her, and that those responsible for the contract intended to keep using her family as part of a cycle that seemed to have no end. The answer Anastasia received was devastating. To those people, her sister's feelings and sacrifice had no value whatsoever. Everything she had done over the years simply did not matter to those responsible for the contract. As if that revelation were not painful enough, they decided to reveal another truth that had been hidden for centuries. The story Anastasia knew about the ancient war was completely false. In reality, her ancestors had not started the conflict as she had always been led to believe. Their lands and titles had been taken by Portesk, and afterward, members of her family were falsely accused of crimes they had never committed. The entire war had been a trap planned from the beginning, and the slave contract that had tormented her family for centuries had been created from a deliberate lie. Anastasia was left completely speechless after learning the truth. Her entire family had suffered for generations because of an injustice that should never have happened. People had been forced to live as slaves. Entire generations had carried the curse, and her own sister had lost her life trying to fulfill a contract based on a lie. The people responsible for the entire scheme, however, seemed to enjoy watching Anastasia suffer. They commented that her older sister had made exactly the same expression when she discovered the truth about the family's past. Unable to endure the situation any longer, Anastasia tried to escape, but she was quickly reminded of the cruelest part of the contract. As long as the special slave portal continued to exist, she would automatically be returned to her master once every 6 months, regardless of where she was or how hard she tried to escape. As long as the special slave gate continues to exist, Anastasia will be forced to automatically return to her master every 6 months, no matter where she is or how far she manages to go. To her, escaping seems completely impossible because the portal will always force her to return, erasing any distance she manages to create, no matter how hard she tries to find a place where she can live freely. The existence of that mechanism remains a constant threat. One night, while she is alone, several men approach her and begin harassing her. When they realize Anastasia is disconnected from her master, they believe they can do whatever they want with her, taking advantage of her situation. The incident makes it clear how cruel that world is and reminds Anastasia once again how limited her freedom is. Because of the slave portal, she believes she will never be able to escape her fate, no matter how far she runs or where she hides. Just as something was about to happen to Anastasia, Ephtal appears and saves her life. Later, Ephtal questions Anastasia about taking the thunder mist without telling him. He wants to understand why she made that decision on her own and why she hid something so important from him. Anastasia explains that she did it because of the special portal, trying to deal with the situation she was trapped in as best as she could. However, Ephtal wants to know why she never told him about the problem before. Anastasia explains that even if she revealed everything, the contract engraved on her body could not be removed because it was created through divine power and could not be undone by an ordinary person. To her, telling the truth would not have made a difference because she believed she was trapped in that fate anyway. For a long time, Anastasia thought no one had enough power to change her situation, so she never even considered asking for help. To her, the contract was a sentence she simply had to accept. Ephtal then reveals his true identity. He is Ephtal Olcott, known as the legendary god of thunder light. Anastasia is shocked to learn that her master had died in his previous life and was later reincarnated in this body. The revelation completely changes the way she sees Ephtal, especially after realizing that he had a very different history from the one she knew. To prove his strength, Ephtal demonstrates some of his abilities and makes it clear that he understands exactly what Anastasia is going through. He realizes that her problem is not simply a matter of strength, but also that she is trapped by a contract that seems impossible to break. Ephtal promises to stay by her side and deal with the situation, assuring her that she will not have to face everything alone. Afterward, the elf takes a sword belonging to the Port's family to be sold. The buyer is impressed by the weapon's quality and recognizes it as a historical item, practically a national treasure. The sword is worth far more than an ordinary weapon, making the deal even more interesting for Ephtal. They discuss the initial price until they reach an agreement of 5,000 gold coins, concluding that he can make a large amount of money from them. After realizing the potential value of the other weapons, Ephtal understands that those items could provide a considerable amount of resources and that there is still a lot of money to be made from what he already possesses. The next morning, Anastasia appears before the boy and asks him to return the sword. The scene returns to the two of them talking. The boy immediately realizes that something is wrong and asks why she is making that request. Anastasia fears that he is angry because she stole his sword, but the boy tries to understand what really happened before drawing any conclusions. He remembers that Anastasia had no freedom to choose while she remained bound to the slave gate. Even so, her sister had managed to partially resist the contract's influence and had lived to protect her. Little by little, Anastasia realizes that her sister had not completely lost her own will, even while being subjected to the same situation. She then understands that her biggest problem was not only the contract, but also the fact that she had given up fighting against it. For a long time, Anastasia believed she had no choice and simply accepted it as her fate. Now, she begins to realize that she can still make some decisions on her own. Anastasia acknowledges that she spent too long believing she could not change her fate, and finally understands the meaning behind what Ephtal had been trying to teach her. Ephtal shows Anastasia that she can still refuse things she does not want. For the first time, she understands that having her own will also means having the right to say no, even when someone tries to force her to obey. The scene returns to Anastasia. She then makes a direct request and demands that the boy return the sword. Anastasia repeats the request, making it even clearer that she truly wants the weapon returned and that this is a decision she is making of her own free will. At that moment, everything changes. Her former master appears and tries to intimidate her, reminding her that slaves who defy their masters can face terrible consequences. Even in the face of the threat, Anastasia does not back down. She decides that she will no longer run and will not continue blindly obeying simply because she fears the consequences. The man tries to frighten her and attacks her, claiming that he needs to teach her who the real master is. Anastasia stands firm and even accepts the possibility of dying, showing how much her determination has changed. When the attack begins, Ephtal intervenes. Anastasia manages to resist, but Ephtal recognizes her courage and says that she has already done enough to redeem herself. Soon after, the Lord of the Archipelago appears and confronts Ephtal. He believes Anastasia still belongs to him and tries to involve Ephtal in the situation, as if he has the authority to demand that she be returned. After being struck, the Lord of the Archipelago becomes furious and orders his men to attack immediately. He reminds them that this is his mansion, located in Horta's territory, one of the most important families among the demons, and claims to have 300 guards ready to eliminate any intruder. He then calls his soldiers to surround Ephtal and Anastasia. believing that their overwhelming numbers will be enough to guarantee his victory. The owner of the place can barely believe what has happened, as all the confidence he had in his guards disappears within moments. Even after being defeated, he still tries to find a way to turn the situation in his favor, and remembers that Anastasia is still there. Meanwhile, Ephtal receives information from Marie. She explains that the items stolen from the house have already been sold, and also reveals the results of her investigation into the Port's family. The investigation uncovered several accusations against the family, including involvement in the trade of stolen artifacts, the smuggling of magical potions, and connections to the local mafia. The findings show that the problems surrounding the family were much greater than they initially appeared, revealing a series of illegal activities connected to their business. Ephtal confirms that he had already encountered some criminals involved in these activities and that all of them had been defeated. This makes it even clearer that Marie's investigation was helping reveal the true extent of the problems surrounding the Port's family. At another point, Abe receives a decision that completely changes his situation. The institution's president declares that Abe is not worthy of receiving his diploma and uses his authority to expel him. The decision leaves Abe facing a new reality, as he loses the opportunity he had hoped to obtain. Meanwhile, Anastasia is deeply shaken by everything that happened and apologizes to her master. She still feels responsible for some of the problems that arose and cannot simply forget everything that happened. However, Ephtal does not blame her for what happened. He only asks her to listen to him and tries to reassure her, showing that she does not have to carry that burden alone. Little by little, he tries to make her understand that what happened should not erase the change she had achieved or make her believe again that she has no control over her own life. After everything that happened, Anastasia admits that she is finally feeling better. She then makes an important decision about her own life and decides that she will no longer abandon herself, no matter what fate lies ahead. To Anastasia, no one but herself should decide how she will live her life, even though obstacles still remain and the contract continues to be a problem. She decides that she will no longer accept everything without fighting or simply obey out of fear. Her recent experience showed her that she could still make her own decisions, and now she intends to hold on to that will. With this new determination, she thanks her master and, from that moment on, repeatedly calls him by that title, showing how much this change has meant to her. Anastasia finally begins to see that she still has a will of her own and can continue moving forward without simply accepting the fate others have chosen for her. Ephtal Somber receives confirmation from Merlin that the case involving the Port's family has been forwarded to the Noble Salmon organization, which will begin an investigation soon. With that problem resolved, Ephtal makes it clear that the real work can finally begin. The next objective is to forcibly deactivate the special slave portal. The task, however, will not be simple, since this means facing the contracted beast connected to the portal. Merlin explains that a contracted beast is practically a god, possessing such absurd power that an ordinary human would have no chance of resisting. Even so, there is a pact with God that makes it possible to deal with these creatures. Anastasia reminds Ephtal that he had promised to help her. Ephtal assures her that he will keep his word and asks her not to worry. As he prepares to carry out the forced deactivation, Anastasia decides to hide and wait for the right moment. Later, Anastasia appears before Merlin and Ephtal completely remorseful. She apologizes for betraying the Magian's trust and states that, if the two are willing to forgive her, she will have nothing else to complain about. Even so, she receives a clear condition. Whenever she returns to the location, she must be accompanied by Merlin or Ephtal. If she appears alone, she will not be allowed to enter. Despite the scolding, Anastasia tries to make up for the problems she caused by offering to clean the treasure vault. Merlin considers the idea unnecessary, but she insists, saying that she wants to help somehow. The problem is that the vault does not contain only ordinary riches. Merlin warns Anastasia to be very careful, as there are various dangerous treasures stored there. Some were used in ancient rituals, while others carry curses. The worst part is that many of these objects have been stored since Merlin's childhood, and even she does not know all of their details. While moving the objects around, Merlin ends up coming across something strange, a rat. Suddenly, she begins to realize that she has turned into a child, and that she had activated some kind of curse by opening one of the boxes. But the result raises an even greater concern. There is a possibility that Merlin's magical power has disappeared. The situation seems serious, but Merlin decides not to bother Ephtal, who is busy preparing for an important ceremony. The two decide to go to the school to try to find some document that can undo the curse, but they need to act with extreme caution. If anyone discovers that Merlin has been cursed, the situation could become a huge problem, especially if Ephtal finds out. The two arrive at the academy trying not to attract attention. Anastasia asks where Merlin usually keeps the documents related to curses, assuming they are in the library. The answer, however, is unexpected. The documents are kept in the director's office. While looking for a way to get inside and find the necessary information, they realize that they are not alone. A strange noise catches their attention, and someone asks what is going on. The answer is uncertain, but it seems that something has just moved inside the room. The search for the documents quickly turns into an even more suspicious situation, making it clear that the curse problem is far from being resolved. With the path apparently clear, Anastasia asks how they will manage to enter the director's office. Merlin reveals that she has the key, making the break-in much easier. Meanwhile, some students comment on the arrogant behavior of a transfer student and on Director Merlin's plans involving improvements to the magical swordsman Calicrum. They also criticize Merlin, calling her arrogant and even an old witch, without realizing that she may be listening to everything. When someone realizes that the director's voice was heard recently, doubts arise about why he is there, since he should be off duty. To avoid trouble, the students quickly decide to leave. Shortly afterward, Anastasia and Merlin end up being discovered. Faced with the situation, Merlin asks them to stay calm and tries to improvise an excuse. The person who finds them realizes that Anastasia looks familiar and comments that the other one looks like the director. To escape the situation, Anastasia claims that the two are relatives of the director. The excuse works, and the resemblance between them ends up serving as convincing justification. She decides to personally accompany them to the director's office. The situation leaves Merlin and Anastasia completely tense. They realize that they need to get rid of that person as quickly as possible, but they have no choice but to accept the help and continue pretending that everything is normal. Finally, they arrive at the director's office. After wishing them good luck with their studies, she leaves, finally allowing the two to breathe a sigh of relief. As soon as they are alone, Merlin and Anastasia try to open the door. However, another problem soon arises. There is a door that they cannot open without Marin's key. Not knowing what to do, they panic. The only alternative is to call Maria, who appears shortly afterward. Maria is willing to help and assures them that if any problem arises, the two can count on her. After resolving the situation, she says goodbye and leaves the two alone again. Merlin comments that working without magic is extremely inconvenient, but considers it lucky that Maria appeared at that moment. With the path finally clear, they turn all their attention back to the book they were looking for. When they find the volume related to the ancient curse, however, they discover another complication. The old sorcerer's book can only be opened by someone who possesses magical power, without magic to unlock it. Merlin realizes that the situation has become even worse. Once again, they need to turn to Sister Maria to move forward with the investigation. After being called, Maria agrees to help. Despite all the difficulties, the two finally find a way to continue searching for the information they need to figure out how to deal with the curse. Maria is surprised to discover that the book Anastasia was looking for was actually a powerful grimoire. Even so, she offers to help whenever the two need to consult other magical books, assuring them that she can wait for them while they study. Finally, Anastasia finds information that could explain how to break the curse. The grimoire states that, in order to dispel the smoke surrounding the soul and break the so-called white curse, the affected person needs to be enveloped by the refreshing aroma of juicy fruits. The problem is that the book does not explain exactly what this means. After analyzing the description, they discover that they need a Junitron. Maria explains that there is probably one in the sound room and offers to get it. Anastasia thanks her for all the help, but decides that she and Merlin can get the item themselves. They find the Junitron and begin trying to figure out how to use it to break the curse. Since the grimoire's description said that the aroma should envelop the soul, a rather obvious question arises. Perhaps the Junitron needs to be eaten. Anastasia decides to try it, but the reaction is immediate. The taste is extremely bitter and sour, causing her to complain to Merlin for letting her eat it even though she knew it would be horrible. Merlin apologizes, but Anastasia decides that she should try it too. The situation changes when Ephtal appears accompanied by Yutaru. Merlin explains what is happening and apologizes for bothering him right when a battle against the contracted beast is approaching. Ephtal, however, makes it clear that he is not angry. He simply wishes Merlin had consulted him before making any decisions. When Ephtal discovers the method they found to break the curse, Merlin asks if he knows how to use the Junitron. Ephtal confirms that he knows the method and immediately clarifies that the fruit should not be eaten. Merlin realizes that she should have figured that out from the beginning. To solve the problem once and for all, Ephtal decides to take everyone to the hot springs the following day. The idea is to use the heat and steam to release the Junitron's aroma and, in this way, fulfill the condition described in the grimoire. The next day, the group arrives at the hot springs. The intention is simple. Everyone should relax and allow the purification process to happen naturally. Merlin takes advantage of the situation to approach Ephtal and says that, as Mana's disciple, she intends to wash his back. Merlin immediately realizes where this is heading and tries to stop the situation. After so many problems, Merlin realizes that everything ended up being resolved much faster than she expected. At that moment, she comments that she heard a rumor about her master. Ephtal was actually the reincarnation of the god of the light's thunder. Anastasia confirms that she also heard the story. Although she is still confused by the idea, Merlin admits that some things begin to make sense if Ephtal really is the reincarnation of the ancient god. For her, however, believing it is still difficult. Anastasia does not show the same doubt. She remembers the sensation she felt when her magic came into contact with Ephtal's and states that such an experience could only have happened because of him. Merlin also remembers that death or reincarnation should not be judged using only the common sense of that era. The conversation makes Anastasia realize that Merlin and the disciple of death seem to share very similar thoughts. She comments that the two are extremely alike. Merlin then reveals that she has admired Ephtal for more than 400 years and demonstrates how deeply she knows her master. Anastasia cannot hide a certain amount of envy. To her, it seems that Ephtal treats Merlin in a very special way. When Merlin admits that she is worried about her master's identity being forcibly revealed, Anastasia realizes that the real reason is her fear that something might happen to Ephtal. She then tries to reassure her. After all, Ephtal has helped Merlin countless times and has always managed to overcome the difficulties that arose along his path. Because of this, she believes that Ephtal will also be able to carry out the forced opening of the special slave gate. More importantly, she assures Merlin that she will not have to face everything alone, because she will be by his side. As she watches the two, Anastasia once again realizes how much Merlin and Ephtal resemble each other. After enjoying the hot springs, Merlin questions why the magic of that era became so limited. The magical explosion occurred, caused by the destruction of the magical monolith during an investigation into ancient ruins. The disaster spread massive magical contamination throughout the world and made level 9 or higher magic practically unusable. Since Ephtal had reincarnated before the disaster, he retained the ability to use level 10 magic, making him an exception in that era. Merlin realizes that this ability would be essential for facing the contracted beast. Even so, Ephtal decides that he can recover his own high-level magic and promises to continue helping Anastasia. Finally, Ephtal orders the forced monster to be prepared and, together with Merlin, decides to face the contracted beast in order to open the special slave gate. The goal is to use all the available strength to pass through the gate and defeat even the god waiting on the other side.